Welcome to Knife Thoughts. This video is going to be a review of this knife, and this is the Benchmade Shootout. And so this is an out the front automatic knife from Benchmade, and it's one that I picked up for a couple reasons. So first of all, I have been doing a lot of reviews of out the front automatic knives this year here since they were decriminalized for carry where I live. I've always been interested in them, but have been able to justify buying them and do more reviews and things like that because they were decriminalized. So really excited about that. And so this knife has been on my radar for a while, and I got to check it out at Blade Show, thought it was really cool, but it was always just a little expensive for me. So the first reason I finally did pick it up is because this, along with several other Benchmade knives, went on big sales at a lot of dealers, and I decided to pick this up at Knife Ship Free. I really like Knife Ship Free, and they had it on a great sale, and then I had some rewards points, and I think that their reward system is really good. It's easy to use, and so I got this for around $200, whereas they're normally around $300, so 30% discount. The other reason is because I have this Shootout Barlow, and I wanted to get an American-made knife, preferably, that had a similar handle color to basically match this knife. This is a knife that I really love. It is a one of a kind, given to me by the maker, and I wanted to have a modern knife to carry that matched it well. And so this seafoam green version in particular is the one that I decided on because it looked in pictures like it was going to be really close to that Shootout Barlow. Now unfortunately it's not quite exactly the same. I can't really fault it for that because this is a handmade, hand-dyed, one-of-a-kind knife, and so it'd be hard to find the exact shade. But the Shootout is a little bluer, this is a little greener, and it's also not quite the same color as like Jade or Natural G10, like this bead that I put on it from Levy Hill Woodworking. So you can check them out on Instagram if you're interested. They do beads and worry stones and things like that, fellow Barlow Bearcat. And Tom has I have several of his beads on my knives, and I thought that this one would go really well with this, and it does. It's just not exactly the same. So this seafoam green is kind of an interesting color. It doesn't match up with a lot of the other similar colors in the knife world, and I think that that's part of why it went on sale, is because it's a little bit of a weird color for the knife market. Maybe not a lot of people are really into this color. It's not exactly like the mint color that Spyderco does and things like that. So it's kind of a unique thing. I really like it, but it's not exactly what I was looking for, and I'm not sure that there's a huge market for it, particularly because they came out with a lot of different colors. Another thing that was really interesting about this knife to me is the fact that it is very different from a lot of other out the front knives. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is the handle. So this actually has an injection molded plastic handle, and I don't really remember what Benchmade calls it, but it's basically what I'm talking about, like the Spyderco, Andorra, Delica, Andella line, Benchmade Griptilian, this same type of thing where it's a molded plastic handle. And a lot of people kind of talk down on them, but I really like them. I actually wrote an article about why I like them. And I think that they're really durable, they're lightweight, they're low maintenance, but it's very different from most out the front knives, which are almost always aluminum. So here is a Microtech Ultratech, here is an Axial Shift, and here is a Tac Knives Taccom Chimera. And you can see that they are all aluminum, and that's really by far the most common type of handle for out the front knives. There are a few with like G10 sides and things like that, some Altum, but by and large out the front automatics have aluminum handles. So this plastic is a really interesting choice, and really the reason is for it to go along with the other knives in this out series. So Benchmade has the bug out, the tagged out, some other ones that I'm probably not thinking of right now, but they all have that type of handle. So they're all lightweight and, you know, relatively inexpensive in comparison to other knives in Benchmade's lineup. So Benchmade's other out the front knives are like super expensive. But I really like it. I think that it's really well done. So you can see that there's a lot of texture up here, which is really where you're going to be holding a knife. When when you have a knife and you're actually using it, you're usually holding it like that in what I would call a pinch grip. But then there's also this kind of cross-hatching texture, which I really like. It's similar to that on the Griptilian. I don't have a bug out to compare it to, but I really like the texturing on the handle, and it has held up well. I put this knife to use like immediately upon getting it for, you know, some yard work that was relatively tough on it, and it does get dirty. Like you can probably see in here, there's some dirt and such, but it has held up well. Now, one thing with the handle that I will mention is in that first day, I noticed that the screws started to back out. So I did tighten them down, and I think I put Loctite on it, or thread locker, but either way, they did start to come loose and it kind of opened up a little bit, but it hasn't done that again. So just wanted to mention that. Now, the other really interesting thing about this knife that's different from most out the front knives is the blade. So it's not the world's tallest blade, certainly compared to, you know, out the side opening knives. So I'll just use the Griptilian again. You can see the Griptilian's a much taller blade, but it is much taller than a lot of out the front knives. So I'll show you a comparison to the knives that I just had out. Here is the Ultratech. You can see that the Ultratech has less tall a blade. Here is the Shift. The Shift has a little taller blade than the Ultratech, but still not quite as tall as the Shootout. And that Chimera here, much less tall blade on it. And so what that does is it allows for a taller and thinner grind on the edge. So I want to show you that here in comparison to, again, some of these other out the front knives. So if you look at the grind on this blade, this is a really nice thinly ground blade. And that is usually not at all the case on out the front knives. So this is actually ground thinner than I expected it to be completely honest, the Microtech, Ultratech, and Tonto. But it still isn't quite as thin as the Shootout. And then if you get into something, you know, that's like a double edge, it's gonna be way thicker than this Shootout. So it's ground really nicely. It slices really well. I have used this knife a lot, and it does really well. I've been really impressed by how well it slices. So I really like that. It's different than most out the front knives. It's actually ground, you know, to cut things, not just to be fun to open and close. And so I really do like that. I like the blade shape also. It's kind of a, I don't know, like a modified Tonto. It has a curve on this edge instead of being straight, and straight here, and it's not a super hard corner between the two edges. And I find it to be a useful edge. You know, you can do some push cutting with that top edge, and all your normal cutting. I haven't really found any issue with it. Now, that said, it's not perfect. So first of all, one thing that I really wish they had done differently is this switch. So when I'm holding this knife, if it's closed, that switch is really right into my web of my thumb. Even when it's open, it's kind of right there, particularly if I put my thumb on the blade, on the spine of the blade, but it's still kind of right there. I think that this ramp could have been significantly less pointy. So something more like literally all of the other out the front switches. So you can see the Ultratech there, the Shift. The Shift is very low profile. It could be somewhere, you know, closer to those two, and I think it's going to work just as well and give you, you know, a more ergonomic handle that you won't have that sticking into your hand. Now, for me, this is just big enough for my hand. So it's not a small knife, but it's just big enough that I can get a full 4-finger grip without my pinky starting to go over the edge. So it is big enough. It's not a small knife, but it's kind of right on the edge. Really the main thing that I wish that they would have changed or done differently about this knife is this switch. But that brings me to another kind of interesting thing about this knife, and that is that the blade comes out of the center of the handle. And so you might say, well, why is that interesting? Well, that's not true for pretty much any other out the front knife. It might be true for the Deadlock by G&G Hawk, but it's not true for, that's another TacCom knife. It's not true for Microtech knives, and it's not true for axial knives. You can see that they come out from towards one side of the handle, and it's because the actual internals are a little different of this knife. I'm not going to take it apart for you. I'm sure there's lots of videos on YouTube where you can actually see the insides, but it's a little different how it works. There's 2 tracks here instead of just one, and so it allows that blade to come out from the center of the handle. It also gives it a little bit of a different feel on this action. It shoots out nice and fast, nice and hard, and retracts nice and fast, nice and hard, but it just feels a little different. It's like a little bit more of like a thwack and more like a click. So show you that a couple times, then show you a comparison. So compare that to the Ultratech. And then to the Shift. Just a little bit of a different sound and a different feel to it. I don't mind it at all, but I think some people might think it feels a little bit less robust, I guess you could say. I don't think that it probably is less robust, but it just might feel that way. The way that some people find the bug out and knives in that line to feel less robust because of how the handle feels and it sounds and everything like that. Now, the switch might be a little easier to actuate than other out the front knives, which I really appreciate. One thing that, since I have had a lot of out the front knives over this past year and used them a lot, one thing that I really don't like about them is the difficulty of actuating. My wife always says that it feels like it's going to give you thumb arthritis, and I do feel that the Shootout is easier to actuate than the Ultratech or the Shift, but pretty close to the Shift. I would say the Ultratech is harder than the other ones. So I do appreciate that. I think that it's nice for it to be less difficult. It doesn't really need to be that difficult. I don't think it's needed as a safety feature or anything like that. So I do appreciate that. So overall, it's a very interesting knife. It's kind of a very different knife in several ways from most other out the front knives. I really appreciate that the blade is ground well for cutting. I really like the material of the handle, and the ergonomics are pretty good, if not for this way overly pointy switch. So it's an interesting knife, one that I am glad to have picked up and checked out, and I hope you have enjoyed the video on this knife. If you have, make sure you give it a thumbs up, leave any comments you have, subscribe to the channel, click the bell and select all so you know when I post new videos. Check out my website, knifethoughts.com, where I post articles on knives like this and knife related topics. And last but not least, as always, don't forget to go out and do good.